Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt live. I woke up this morning to the news that both Princeton and Northwestern had won their first round NC2A tournament games, and I began scanning the night sky in California for a meteor. I mean, Northwestern and Princeton both win their first round. I don't know that that's ever happened before. Duke won. That's the other smart kid school. So that's kind of, we're used to Duke winning because they have a subdivision, a basketball major that people take advantage of. But I'm just amazed. We had Duke, UCLA, Penn State won something. Now that's kind of remarkable. If you're an Ohio State fan, you realize Penn State doesn't win a lot. I told you that Arkansas won too, so Senator Cotton will be a little bit insufferable. But maybe by Saturday night they'll have come down to earth. Auburn, Northwestern, Tennessee, and Houston. And if you don't know this, a lot of Beltway journalism depends upon the output of Medill School graduates. I think Medill is probably the best connected journalism school, more than Columbia, more than Missouri, more than the other fine programs like Syracuse and Ohio University, which is not an accredited college, but nevertheless has a good television program. Miami of Ohio. There are lots of great journalism programs in America, but the best is probably Medill. Because they do it as undergraduates, not as graduates. And then the network effects of the Medill mob are just extraordinary inside of Washington, D.C. But they're all up. They're not working today. They're not listening to this. They're all hung over. But that's good news. Now, let me give you the other good news. Wall Street banks are going to put $30 billion into the First Republic Bank, so that's not going to fail over the weekend, so that's good. Then the Wall Street Journal helpfully tells us that bank failures, like earlier shocks, raise the odds of a recession. Do you think? What is most amusing on the morning is the New York Times story on what happened last weekend when Team Biden bailed out the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank because they're blue banks from Silicon Valley and Manhattan. And the long story, I put it over at my Twitter account, you can go find it, concludes that nobody saw these interest rates coming. Well, if you've been listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show since January of 2021, so for 2 years and 2 months since Joe Biden blew everything and then blew 3 more rounds of spending, you have to be a dummy not to know that inflation will follow. So I'm not buying that. Most important story of the morning by far is that Xi Jinping is going to visit Vladimir Putin next week in Russia. So Big Brother is going to go see Little Brother who's gotten himself into trouble. And what are we going to do? And Xi is going to go fix it, and Xi is going to be more powerful as a result of this. And at the same time, though, a bit of good news. China is becoming just an immediate existential threat to the West because we're just asleep, and they are everywhere. It's as though when the Athenians went to address the Melian assembly, the Spartan came to them and said, the Melians went to the Spartans and said, while you were at home, they are constantly abroad. And so while we're screwing around at home on this and that and various woke stuff, the CCP is constantly abroad like the Athenians. It doesn't end well for China, but it didn't end well for Sparta either. They're not around. Here's a good bit of news. Wall Street Journal this morning. Silicon Valley and Capitol Hill build an anti-China alliance. A group of Silicon Valley executives, including Peter Thiel, and Washington lawmakers are quietly mobilizing against China's involvement in the U.S. tech industry. They plan to meet for a private dinner on Wednesday to discuss China national security and intensifying competition between the tech sectors of the U.S. and China. This is before TikTok gets hammered. TikTok's going to be out of business in the United States before long. Here's the deal. I love this Hill and Valley Forum. The key thing is from whom will the Silicon Valley big tech people listen to advice? They might go get Ambassador Robert O'Brien. They might get the Deputy National Security Advisor, Matt Pottinger. Go get Representative Mike Gallagher. Go get Representative Michael Waltz. Go get yourself the Michael Pillsbury. If he's around, get good information in, you'll get a good product out. But if you sit around listening to Wall Street bankers, as you have for the last 30 years, you're not going to get good information on what the CCP is up to. It requires an entirely different set of lenses than we've had for 30 years, since the end of the Cold War. We got to put back on our superpower competition lenses. Yesterday, Roger Wicker went to the Senate floor, senator from Mississippi, friend of the program, and he's begun this effort. Let's listen to cut number 9.
In American history, one foreign and defense policy has succeeded above all others, a national policy of preparedness. President Washington said, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effective means of preserving peace." Theodore Roosevelt called it wielding a big stick, and President Reagan called it peace through strength. Indeed, we ought to listen to those great captains of American purpose. We should rearm and strengthen the United States so no adversary dreams of acting against our interest. With that in mind, I want to start with Taiwan and Ukraine. Without a doubt, there's no greater challenge than deterring Xi Jinping from taking Taiwan. Failing to defend Taiwan would plunge the globe into an economic depression and end our hopes for an American-led century.
Let's go on with Senator Wicker for two more cuts. Cut number 10.
To ensure that never happens, Congress should pursue four priorities with Taiwan this year. First, we should pressure the Biden administration to exercise the $1 billion of drawdown authority we provided them in the Taiwan Enhanced Resilience Act last year. Second, we should match Taipei's growing investment in critical capabilities. I'm disappointed that the Biden administration has once again failed to request foreign military financing money for Taiwan. Congress will have to act. Third, we should fix the foreign military sales backlog and pursue real reforms to the process. Right now, it takes us too long to get crucial weapons to our allies. For example, unless something changes, Taiwan will wait nearly a decade to get a recent order of harpoons. Fourth, we should expand our work with allies and partners to help Taiwan defend itself with military and non-military tools of power.
I want to play one more. Stop right there. I want to make sure we get the key where he sticks the landing. This is Senator Wicker yesterday, cut number 14.
I had the privilege of leading Congress to pass the SHIPS Act, which requires the Navy, in statute, to achieve a 355-ship fleet as soon as practicable. Unfortunately, the Biden administration has shirked its responsibility to enforce this statute and to maintain American naval superiority. The administration has repeatedly sent Congress requests to actually shrink the fleet. This is unacceptable. It should be unacceptable on
Senator
both sides
Wicker,
of the aisle.
finally, and we need to have this conversation ongoing because the China challenge is real. Xi is going to be with Putin. Their little buddy over Khamenei in Iran is part 3. We need serious people doing serious things at a serious time. For example, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, who went in to talk to the Howard University basketball team after they were disappointed with their opening round loss. Cut number 18.
You guys are so good. You guys are so good. You played hard. You played to the very last second. You made all us Bisons so proud. You hustled out there. You are smart. You are disciplined. You put everything you had into the game. And you know, that's what it's about, right? Until the last minute. You guys did that. You didn't stop until the last second. You did not stop. And that is so inspiring. So you keep playing with chin up and shoulders back. Because you showed the world who Bison are. Right? I mean, literally what you have done is in historic proportion. You know, I was at Howard back in the day where we were just happy that there was a game, much less getting to this place, right? And
Okay, I can't bear it anymore. The Howard University Bison got blown out by the Jayhawks last night. I mean, they're the 16th seed. The Jayhawks are one of the best teams in the country. The Jayhawks won 96-68. And I'm thinking about those poor kids, the players, these young men who have gone to the dance and they just got smoked, blown off of the floor. And in strolls the Vice President of the United States to give them the worst pep talk I've ever heard. But then again, you don't give pep talks to people after they lose unless you're the coach and you know maybe the worst. That's an episode of Veep. I may have to rewatch Veep because we've got real live Veep. And if there was any network in America that had gumption, they'd be doing a weekly show on the adventures of Vice President Harris. Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm sorry, Howard. You didn't join Northwestern and Princeton, but next year, and we'll keep the VP away. Well, good Friday, America. It's not raining in California, so I'm considering that a victory, and I'm getting my voice back after a week of battling whatever it is that Genghis Kate and gang gave to me. Got through class yesterday, reeled home, went to sleep around 5 o'clock last night in California. Because it's just one of those 2-week runs that at the end of it, you're looking forward to the weekend, and I'm doing nothing. I'm giving a speech today, but I'll get a nap before then. Here is the deal. Yesterday on this show, Congressman Ro Khanna very, very correctly looked straight into the camera and said, you know, Hugh, we're going to bail out every bank. I'm paraphrasing. But if someone goes under, we're going to guarantee all deposits. That is not the law, right? That's what most people wanted to hear, but that is not the law. And then Janet Yellen went up to the Hill and told James Lankford, one of the smartest senators up there, this, cut number 4.
The deposits in every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of their size, be fully insured now. Are they fully recovered? Every bank, every community bank in Oklahoma, regardless of the size of the deposit, will they get the same treatment that SVBP just got or Signature Bank just got?
A bank only gets that treatment if a majority of the FDIC board, a supermajority of the Fed board, and I, in consultation with the president, determine that the failure to protect uninsured depositors would create systemic risk and significant economic and financial consequences.
So what is
and
your
we
plan?
made that determination.
Right. So what is your
banks.
plan to keep large depositors from moving their funds out of community banks into the big banks? We have seen the mergers of banks over the past decade. I'm concerned you're about to accelerate that by encouraging anyone who has a large deposit in a community bank to say, we're not going to make you whole, but if you go to one of our preferred banks, we will make you whole at that point.
Look, I mean, that's certainly not something that we're encouraging.
That is happening right now.
That is happening because depositors are concerned about the bank failures that have happened and whether or not other banks could also
No,
fail.
it's happening
And
because you're
it's-
fully insured no matter what the amount is if you're in a big bank. You're not fully insured if you're in a community bank.
Well, you're not fully insured. And
You
big-
were at Signature, and it just barely met that threshold. You were at Signature.
Well, we felt that there was a serious risk of contagion that could have brought down and triggered runs on many banks. And that's something, given that our judgment is that the banking system overall is safe and sound, depositors should have confidence in the system, and we took these actions.
So there's a
to
special
discourage
assessment that's been done
contagion.
on community banks in my state and all banks across the country. Was there any discussion that that special assessment would only apply to the larger banks, or was it always assumed the special assessment would cover every bank, including rural banks in my state?
I think I'm not certain what the rules are around that. That's for the FDIC to determine.
It has been reported publicly that SVB had a large number of Chinese investors that are there, including some that were companies directly connected to the Chinese Communist Party. Will those individuals, companies, entities, and investors that are Chinese investors be made whole based on assessments in my banks in Oklahoma? So what I'm asking is, will my banks in Oklahoma pay a special assessment to be able to make Chinese investors whole from Silicon Valley Bank.
Uninsured investors will be made whole in that bank, and I suppose that
Answer
could
means
include-
yes. Senator Langford, could you please move on to something else? Because we don't want the country to understand that our friends in Silicon Valley and Manhattan just got bailed out by the good people of Oklahoma. And in the course of doing so, we sent a lot of money to the Chi-Coms. And that's what she said. And that's not what Ro Khanna said. And that's what I've been afraid of from the beginning. One rule, not an objective. Oh, well, we take a look at it and we got to get a supermajority vote. And maybe it's not systemic. That is exactly the opposite of what Ro Khanna, liberal from Silicon Valley, said yesterday, which is everybody's guaranteed. Look, morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. Just putting out the news to America that 7 out of 10 Catholic bishops have granted a dispensation from the requirement to abstain from eating meat today so that St. Patrick's Day celebrations can go forward. I am curious and asked Anitra Parmele to join me and talk about what Food for the Poor is doing on this St. Patrick's Day as Americans celebrate. Good morning, Anitra. How are you?
Good morning. So grateful to be with you and to invite your listeners to be a part of an extraordinary St. Patrick's Day. I mean, we're offering them an invitation to step into the lives of families throughout the 17 countries where Food for the Poor serves. Countries you've visited, you stood in feeding lines, you've had a chance to actually distribute the food and to look into the eyes of the mothers. It's one thing to talk about the impact of COVID or to talk about how rising food prices, which are an inconvenience often to us, are devastating to families. It's another to go to a feeding center that we last saw bustling with children, and they're now virtually shuttered. So we want to invite you to change that. Right now, a gift of $144 provides a family of 4 food for a year.
Anitra, would you tell people how long you've been with Food for the Poor and why we always select Food for the Poor to partner with? Because I know what your record is and how it came to be, and I trust you with our money. Would you tell people about your own experience with Food for the Poor and the history of the organization?
Well, I'm from South Florida, and so I was aware of Food for the Poor, but I think I did not know just the reach and the heft of the organization. In so many of these countries, we're the largest non-governmental organization, and we come in with efficiency, with partnerships on the ground, with alliance with pastors, ministers on this St. Patrick's Day to know that your gift is going to be distributed by pastors on the ground who are able to say, there is a God who sees you and knows you, and he has heard your prayers is an incredible exchange. But that's why we're able to say something audacious like $144 provides a family with food for a year. So in my 4 years with Food for the Poor, I've had a chance to travel, to stand in front of mothers, to stand in front of fathers. You know yourself. It's one thing to read the headlines, to be a scholar, to look deeply into statistics and what's going on in our world. It's another to see the human stories behind the statistics.
Until one goes into the hillside slums of the Dominican Republic or you climb up to the favelas of Brazil's Rio, you actually don't get it. You're doing the right thing by saying, oh, there are hungry children, I'll help, but you really don't get it. The poorest people live at the farthest top of the mountain because they have to go the farthest for the food and the water distribution center.
Right.
So there are some things you only get from putting eyes on. This year, there are a lot of needs. I mean, the audience came through for Turkey after the earthquake. They came through last year for Ukraine. What about the ordinary bunting and hitting of keeping people alive in Haiti and Honduras and Guatemala? Have people continued to support your efforts there?
We've been so grateful because they have bridged that gap. They have given to families whose faces they won't see. They have taken on as their own that burden because you're exactly right. I remember traveling into Haiti. As I said, I'm from South Florida. A speed bump is a high altitude for me. And to climb into the mountains and to meet Mary Lude and to ask her about her life, I was so honored that she shared with me. But she said, I feel abandoned by my government. by my community. And then she paused and she said, I feel abandoned by God. I feel like he can't see me here. And in your name, because I feel like I travel on behalf of your listeners to make that connection, to bring those stories back. And on behalf of you, I was able to say, oh, Mary Lou, that is a lie. You are seen, you are remembered. And even now, God is moving on his people to meet your needs. So that's what we're inviting you to be a part of. I mean, on a Friday morning, to be a part of a miracle, a transformational story is a pretty good transaction, knowing that
Yeah, it is.
$140
The banner is at the
does
top
such
of
good.
HughHewitt.com. It says give food. The banner is over there at HughHewitt.com. But Anitra, I want to ask you about how many different feeding centers you've been in the last 4 years.
Well, what I love about Food for the Poor is that each solution is unique to the situation. It's not cookie cutter. We don't go in with expectations. Well, this is how we do it well, so we're going to set up this. So I've been in distribution that's been as one-to-one as handing a mother a bag of food and saying, we'll be back next week. I've been a part of massive feeding centers that literally feed tens of thousands of people. And they're huge cauldrons and a line that stretches as far as the eye can see. So the variety has been an indication that Food for the Poor is responding to the needs on the ground rather than coming in with our own expectations. So, as
What?
you know, we've worked with you for Ukraine and with Turkey and Syria, and now to invite you to be a part of our core ask. The solutions are as varied as the situations.
I want to give the phone number as well because Food for the Poor operates now in ways it never used to. You can send my name, HUGH, to 91999. That's a text. Send Hugh to 91999. Or give a call, 855 359 4673. 855 359 HOPE. That's 855 359 4673. Over on my Twitter account, I just tweeted out the link as well. Anitra, in terms of what it does to someone like you. You're a professional relief worker. You go in and out of these countries, are the poorest places on the earth. Do you get tired, worn down, or do you get energized by every visit?
I get energized by every visit because, Hugh, I'm somebody who internalizes. I'm very empathetic, but I'm able to look at a mother and just think, just you wait. Just you wait. When I hear a story of desperation, when she's boiling leaves, when we ask her, oh, I see steam rising out of a pot. What will you be serving your children? And she responds, I just do that so my children don't give up hope. We don't have anything for dinner. I know because I've seen it. We've seen it. That transformation that happens when we bring their stories to you and invite you to step into those stories with a transformational power. It's on the other side of your one-time gift. I am energized because I can't wait to see that situation change.
So $144 feeds a family of four for a year, and $72 feeds two children for a year. I want people to go above that. Gallagher got two people to give $5,000 yesterday. I'll never hear the end of it. I know. He's already called me 3 times to brag on his audience.
And reached out to me.
You see, that's just that's Gallagher. He pretends to be an Irishman. And he's very good, but he's very good about communicating what you do. I want to close by
Are we
saying,
all Irish today?
yeah, we are. I am. I'm actually orange and green, so I can go by way. What is Parmele?
You and
Is
me
that?
both.
Yeah. Oh, are you really orange and green?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Clonmel, the old country.
Lots of orange and green running around. Anitra, last question. I tell people that you specialize. Food for the Poor specializes in food, beans, and clean water. This is not elaborate stuff. This is feeding people. But without that, without water and food, they starve and they despair. Is that a good description?
Oh, it's an excellent description and very apt. Hugh, we look at it and we say something incredible like $144 rescues a family. Imagine the relief for a mother, a father who woke up this morning begging God for a single meal. When they get news that you've made a gift, that your gift is going to provide them food today, tomorrow, next week, next month, it seems incredible that people would say, "Oh, somebody else should do that. Somebody should really take care of that." That sounds like an excellent exchange. Well, may I suggest you can this morning be that someone? I
And it's
love
a
the thought
perfect
that
way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. The banner is at the
truly, and I
top of
love the thought that they have
HughHewitt.com.
no idea help is on the way.
Yeah, help is on the way in the name of the good St. Patrick. Anitra, thank you for joining me. The Food for the Poor banner is over at the top of HughHewitt.com. They sponsor this campaign every Lent, and every Lent I tell my Catholic and Christian friends this is the best spiritual discipline there is, to give of your need, not of your excess, but of giving of your need and being as generous as possible. People like Anitra are out there making sure that your money is stewarded well and it gets to the poor and the starving of Central and South America and the Caribbean. Anitra, happy St. Patrick's Day. Talk to you again next
big
year
earrings
and
abroad,
continue your
Hugh.
great work. Thank you.
Thank
Don't
you,
go
sir.
anywhere, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. Sarah Westwood, whom you can follow on Twitter at Sarah C. Westwood, is the investigative reporter with the Washington Examiner. Good morning, Sarah. How are you for our Friday chat? Can you hear me, Sarah?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, good. I want to begin by reading to you. Okay, we'll get it fixed. I want to read to you Roger Altman, what he said about what happened last weekend, and then compare it with what Janet Yellen said yesterday. What the authorities did over the weekend, by the way, he's the chair of Evercore, which is the fourth largest investment bank in the country. What the authorities did over the weekend was absolutely profound. They guaranteed the deposits, all of them, at Silicon Valley Bank. And what that really means, and they won't say it, and I'll come back to that, what that really means is that they have guaranteed the entire deposit base of the U.S. financial system, the entire deposit base. Why? Because you can't guarantee all the deposits in Silicon Valley Bank, and the next day say to depositors at First Republic, sorry, yours aren't guaranteed. Of course they are. And so this is a breathtaking step which effectively nationalizes or federalizes the deposit base of the U.S. financial system. There's more. Is that the talk of Congressional Hill, Sarah Westwood? Because it is an extraordinary change in 1 week.
It certainly was leading up to that hearing yesterday with Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. And, it was remarkable that she said that's not going to be the policy of this administration. The federal government is not going to insure all deposits, but it's really, really the Biden administration has backed themselves into a corner. You almost wonder if this was a snap decision because Silicon Valley Bank is, uniquely elite, right? Most of its customers were very wealthy, very liberal, venture capitalists and tech entrepreneurs. That's not the sort of people that the Biden administration wants to look on the side of. If you have a smaller regional bank with, mom and pop shops as your depositors, and the Biden administration says that they're not going to bail out that bank, months down the road, how is the administration going to justify that? So I do think they've backed themselves into a corner where they may have to sort of guarantee all deposits moving forward.
Congressman Ro Khanna was on the program yesterday, Sarah Westwood, and said, everybody is ollie in free. And then Janet Yellen shows up 3 hours later and says, no, it depends on whether your failure is contagion. That means they're picking winners and losers. And that means we need to know who lobbied the White House from Signature Bank and SVB over the weekend. Do we have any idea who the depositors called or how often they called? Because they must have had every lobbyist on K Street working all last weekend.
Well, we know that Governor Gavin Newsom was likely among those who were sort of working behind the scenes to try to get a bailout for California. But what's interesting about what Yellen said, right, is that the board of the FDIC, of the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department has to decide whether these banks are too big to fail. SVB and Signature Bank both specifically lobbied to have the too big to fail designation taken off of them. Both of those banks argued that they should not be considered too big to fail, that they were just regional lenders, that they didn't have the sort of exposure and scope of the banks on Wall Street that do have that designation, that have to submit to the stress tests and all of the other requirements of Dodd-Frank. And in 2018, those regulations were rolled back. So SVB is a bank that promised if something ever happened to them, it wouldn't need a bailout. And then as soon as something really did materialize, they went to Washington begging for one.
Now, Patrick McHenry is chairman of House Banking or House Financial Services. Do you have any opportunity to talk to him, Sarah? We lost your picture there, about what is going to happen in the weeks and months ahead? Because I would like to have hearings from the House Financial Services Committee. Have you heard from him anything yet? Oh, we lost her. Doggone it. Whenever I lose, that's the key question. The key question is, will Patrick McHenry hold a hearing? Because yesterday, whoever is the Democrat chairing financial services or banking cut off Jim Lankford. And Jim Lankford was making the key point that you are pushing every deposit out of a community bank and into one of the big four, and maybe one of the big 20, because Signature and SVB were part of the big 20. But if you're a little bank in Midland or you're a little bank somewhere else, you have just screwed them all. And James Lankford has probably been hearing from his community bankers, like I've been hearing from bankers all week, about the unintended consequences of what was a rush decision. And it was a rush decision because the depositors were going to have a bad week. But they didn't articulate a policy. And I discussed this yesterday with former Solicitor General Paul Clement. When courts can decide either they're going to pay attention to what an administrative agency did or just give it Chevron deference, that isn't the rule of law. That's the rule of the judge. That's the rule of the connected. And what we have now lurched into with the Yellen testimony yesterday is the lurch of the insured versus the uninsured. And I don't know, my small business is not one that I have to worry about moving because I bank with a very fine bank. But I wonder how many people are spending this weekend making a very careful evaluation of where they bank and whether or not this whole deal is going to end up making the four super banks the depository of choice. They've really screwed this up. But then again, it's the Biden administration. There isn't anything that they touch that doesn't end up like the Afghanistan collapse. Everything ends up like the Afghanistan collapse because they are not competent and they do not understand how uncertainty spooks markets. And they just did it yesterday. Unbelievable. Time to go back in time to Joseph Chamberlain with Dr. Larry Arnn. The Hillsdale Dialogue is coming up, America. Stay tuned for it. We'll do a little walk down, just get our blood pressure down because it could be another wild weekend in the financial markets. Stay tuned.